Good morning, sunshines. So today we're going to talk about editing. Today we're going to talk about discerning what is good, what is bad, listening. We're going to talk about seeing with our eyes, or listening with our eyes, I guess the best way that we've talked about it before. Just as far as the prompt script is concerned, you need to have been working on that. There are 3 sections to the prompt script. You have the beginning section, which is all the contact sheets, all the rehearsal reports, all the rehearsal schedules, all that sort of stuff that we created for daily parts of the play. Then you have the script part of the play that's going to have your blocking on one side of the page and the script on the other side of the page. Again, the blocking, if you want to have the set diagram, great. If you don't, fine. It's your prompt script, whatever way you want to lay it out. If all you want to have is the set diagram with arrows, if that works for you, great. If you want to have a combination of 2, that's fine with me. But have some sort of way of figuring out your plan for each scene. Eventually, for the blocking project, you're going to do about a 7-page scene of your choice in the course of the play. I mean, you can begin with the beginning if you want, or if you want to do a scene from Act 2 or scene from Act 3, whatever section of the play you feel most. You have a mental image of what's going on the stage. You feel that's most powerful. Use that part. Then the 3rd section is full of things like your cue sheets, your costume plots, your light plots as far as where the cues go and all that sort of stuff. And you got diagrams of set diagrams or renderings of costumes, dramaturgical research that you receive, etc. All goes in that 3rd section. Everything is tabbed, so it's easy to find. But again, that's what you're working for with your prompt script. Yes, in addition to going along and figuring out your blocking for the scene. All right, let's talk a little bit about how to know when a scene is working. Before I get into Peter Brook, here's a little bit from the head of the theater theater in Florida.
On behalf of TVLessonDotCom, my name is Joseph Adler, and I'm producing artistic director of Gable Stage in Coral Gables, Florida. Let's talk a little bit about the approach to the play. Now, in theater, I think the playwright is supreme. Now, we always hear talk about how important the director is in film, and certainly that's true. I'm not saying a director isn't really important when it comes to theater, but in theater, a playwright is protected in so many ways that most film writers do not have the protection, at least until they become well-known names and can ask for that protection contractually. Every playwright has the right to approve of any changes that are made. And many of them are very willing to make those changes, and many others are intransigent when you start to discuss them. So in any case, when it comes to approaching the work, the most fundamental thing is to try to find out what this play is really about. And when you figure that out, you know, from that material comes the approach. I think form definitely has to grow out of content. Style has to evolve from the content of the play. If you impose your own style on something and it isn't really right, you're definitely going to have problems. I think so often we put a mirror in front of ourselves, and instead of seeing what it is we're doing, we're really looking at ourselves and trying to impose whatever it is we would like to be doing with this material on material that it is not necessarily suited for. So the play comes first. I think that's true, of course, for the actors. Everything they need to know is somewhere in that play, one hopes. The quest for that and for the meaning and interpretation of that meaning is what this craft is all about. But first comes the word, and the word is supreme. It's one of the many things I love about theater. That's pretty much how I feel about what comes first.
Awesome. Over here, let's talk a little bit about 3, 2.
Let's talk a little bit about how you know when a scene is working. Obviously, the process, the rehearsal process, is about making the scene work. Now, making the scene work is one thing, knowing when it's working is another, and then perhaps the most important element is knowing when the scene is working, how you got there, and being able to maintain that. And that means maintain it for 6 or 8 performances a week and for however long the run is. I say maintain it. I think one of the things that's so interesting is that even within the framework that you establish and that you set, the great thing about live theater is that there is variation in performances. No 2 performances are exactly alike, ever. No matter how much you rehearse, no matter how much you set things, they will always be a little bit different depending on a lot of factors, including the audience. There again, as I said, is the glory of live theater. But I think what's essential, what's really essential in rehearsal, is to know what it is you're looking for, be open to accidents. Sometimes you think you're looking for something and you think that's your goal, and you find out in the course of the process that something else works. I think it's important to stay open. It's also important, as I said earlier, talking about the process, it's important that everybody feel free to do their best work and be relaxed enough to take chances, which I think also means that when you're trying to find out what works and doesn't work, you have to give the collaborators, the actors, the opportunity to feel open to making contributions and to taking risks. That's essential in the process. So I think we all know when, well, I take that back. I was going to say I think we all know when something's working. Actually, the truth is a director's job is to take something that works and choreograph it into the whole. I mean, an actor is not concerned about, it may be concerned about making a choice, but a director's job is to take that choice and orchestrate it into the whole so it works in tandem with all the other choices. That's what makes this whole thing so fascinating. On behalf of TVLesson.com, I'm Joseph Adler. Thank you for watching.
Again, he spends a little bit more time talking about authors than you will probably deal with unless you're working with an original script. But even when you're working with an original script, oftentimes authors aren't necessarily in residence. And so really, even though I'm going to say you certainly have to respect an author, anybody who's written a play and their intent. Shakespeare is one of the best playwrights in the history of the world. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You need to find a way to make it work for telling the story to that audience. Again, one of the things we're going to talk about is Peter Brook is a writer, and he wrote a book called The Empty Stage. And one of the things that he talks about in his book is about how deadly theater can become, especially things like Shakespeare, because people assume there's only one way to do it. Because there's the way, there's the Laurence Olivier way, or the Kenneth Branagh way, but the truth be known is that if you have a live audience, and if you have a live actor on stage, that actor has got to find a way to communicate the essence of the scene to that audience. Again, if you've got, let's say you've got a blind audience, the visuals mean nothing to a blind audience, right? If you're doing a play for some sort of theater of the blind. If you've got a deaf audience, the visual means everything to them. So there may be rational reasons why you may do different interpretations of the play for different reasons, yes? I'm gonna say, for instance, our audiences at AUM tend to be 18 to 22-year-old college kids who may, if they're lucky, have read Julius Caesar in high school and may have studied another play of Hamlet, let's just be bold and say that. But for the most part, again, living in Montgomery, Alabama, because of the Alabama Shakespeare Festival, they may have even seen one or two, because a lot of times those high school groups will go to see those plays. So I'm going to say they're more exposed to Shakespeare than a lot of kids are in a lot of environments. But even that, I'm going to say most of our audience, I would say the majority of our audience probably has never seen a Shakespearean play. And so finding a way to relate that archaic language and make it still relevant to the audience that you're telling the story to may require things like some updated music or some updated costumes or some updated banter, the way that they wear or walk or talk and that sort of thing may expose character in a way that you wouldn't necessarily do on Broadway or at the Royal Shakespeare Company. But it works for that audience. It works for those people in that environment, and that's what you have to have an ear for as a director. You can't worry about what people will think outside of this theater, this community. Those are the people who are coming to see your plays, and if people from outside that community come to see it, they can appreciate it or not, but they can't speak to how that audience receives your message. If you live in the community, you're much more a part of the community, much more understanding of what's going on. And I will tell you, your voice is going to have more relevance than those voices that might be outside of that community, especially if you're dealing with something as archaic as Shakespeare may tend to be. Again, in the book, he talks about this idea of the deadly theater, which is just redoing the way things have been done. Peter Brook says that you should always attack a play as a new thing, as a new play, never having experienced it before, even from rehearsal to rehearsal. If you have an actor, for instance, who is, let's just say, losing their voice, yes, just as an example, you need, as a director, to address the issue before they lose their voice. Come up with a different way of interpreting the lines, a different way of approaching the, whether it's improving their breath techniques. I mean, there's physical things you can do to give an actor more strength, but there's also things you can say that say, listen, there's no way you're going to do 7 shows a week or 8 shows a week for as long as this run is, if you keep up maintain that pace with your voice, yes? And so finding other alternatives, despite the fact that the loud alternative might be the best alternative, it may be that loud alternative only happens on those special nights like opening night or the Sunday matinee where the audience has to hear that sort of thing. Every day should be full of new discoveries. But just because something is funny in a rehearsal doesn't mean it's funny. It may be funny that night, but really time will tell what is funny and what, so you have to be able to hear with new ears every night to see if that still rings true. I love adding gags to show, but when a gag doesn't work, it's awful. So you have to be attuned to the nature of the beast and allow for the fact that was just a hysterical moment that we had that one night, but it'll never be that spontaneous again for whatever reason. And oftentimes that happens in performance as opposed to rehearsal, where something very funny will happen in performance, but again, it's just that crowd that night that found it funny. Reimagining that or happening over and over again, I would stick to the plan before I deviated, before something happened, yes. Now, again, if you make a discovery, we talked about before when we were doing Galileo, and there was a time when our Galileo went up on a line for half a second and discovered a rock in his pocket from the first act and gave it to the man who had been a child in the first act as he was passing his knowledge along. Became very symbolic, and I wish we would have thought about it the first week. So that doesn't mean that new discoveries can't still happen in performance, but again, you want to try as best you can to get all those little kinks worked out during the rehearsal process. Theater is always what I'm going to call self-destructive. Every time you've done something, every time you've done it for the night. There's no going back. The nice thing about this video is if I suddenly flub up or somebody walked in the door or, the squirrel jumped off the landing over there and, disrupted things. I don't know if you can see the landing, but I could stop and restart and you would never know. In theater, once it's happened, it's happened. If somebody coughs on the laugh line, you're not gonna get a laugh that night on that line because it's happened. Every moment that you are performing a play in that evening has gone. It is self-destroyed, yes? The next chance you have to correct it is the next time you do it. And if you can anticipate things like, for instance, holding for laughs. Like, for instance, overcoming some issue in the staging that may have developed over time, right? People upstaging each other, all that sort of stuff. Actors just, in performance, sometimes will meander into the wrong world. So having notes, people are saying, well, once the show starts, I don't give notes. If you need to give a note, give a note. Empower your stage managers to keep the show the way you intended it to be, so that the actors know that when the stage manager gives a note during a performance run, it is just as if the note has come from you. So those need to be things that are passed down. Life is altering every day. For instance, right now, I am living in a world where we just lost $15 an hour as a minimum wage in a bill that was discussed yesterday. Yes? Now, how that's going to affect an audience tonight, I don't know. But a month ago, the Capitol was stormed by a bunch of crazy people and almost taken over. Has that changed the world? Yes, it has changed the world. So sometimes there are life-altering events that cause different plays to be read in different manners. If you've ever, when you're doing a play and it's talking about people storming the castle, well, I've just recently lived through something like that, and I've got a very different opinion of what it might look like or feel like than I did a year ago, right? We're living through this, currently, COVID-19 thing where we've all got these masks on and we're having to protect each other and get vaccinated and all that sort of stuff. You're living day to day with this gloom and doom. Trust me, it has altered the way I live my life, and the theater is basically closed down for the last year. So I'm going to tell you, for the next year, anybody that's doing a play, people are just going to flock to it just because it's a play. Good, bad, and different. Just somebody's doing a play. Thank you, Jesus. Let's go get out of the house, or at least turn it, get it on video, that sort of stuff. So everything is relative to the audience that is at hand. You need to speak to that audience at every time. You're always in the present. The theater is always happening in the present. It's always now, right? There's never any before or after. It is always in the present. One of the things that Peter Brook talks about is that Grand Opera, for instance, is what he calls the deadliest theater, because it relies so much on its traditions and it's so much on its old staging, the way it was done originally, which he's, again, is an advocate against, I would say. Now, does it have a historical significance to see that type of theater? Yeah. I think it's pretty cool to go back and see a 16th century opera and how they did it. It is certainly different than the techniques that we use today. But if everything was staged that way, it would get very boring very quickly. So does it have its place? Sure. Is it the living cutting edge avant-garde of the world? No. It's done happened, yes? Now, one of the other things he talks about is how Broadway, while be it not necessarily dead the theater, Broadway is a machine. Broadway is about a product that is being sold to the public. And his point in The Empty Stage is that should not be the be-all, end-all of storytelling. Making a profit should not be, at the end of the day, making a business, making a product that is purchased as opposed to any other business. In theater, what Peter Brook points out is that a living theater is something that inspires, that encourages, that reaches an emotional peak in the audience, that causes them to alter, to change, to see the world in a different way. That's, according to Brook, living theater. And I would tell you, I agree, that's the reason we're talking about things like this, because that's what I think you need to understand as a director, is that you have the power to not just tell a story, you have the power to change people's attitudes, to change their life. One of my favorite stories is about, and this happened to many people, but there's a musical called La Cage aux Folles, opened in the early 80s. Homosexuality with AIDS and all that sort of stuff was a big taboo in the early 80s. I'm saying homosexuality has been a big taboo, probably still is today in many areas. But there were many people who went to that musical, and in the beginning of the musical covered their faces because they were in a parlor of homosexuals who were performing at a cabaret. And by the end of the show, when the two lead men fell in love and walked into the sunset, tears were falling down their face. You have changed a person's life and attitude. Now, it doesn't mean that they're not gonna change back, but at least you've opened up a chasm, opened up given a little bit of leeway for the wall to break, yes? So again, that's the power of good theater. Good theater, living theater, has the power to motivate, the power to move, and should. But there's, you've got to find how to speak to your audiences. One of the things about, once you've gotten to the part of this rehearsal where you're now staging and starting to clean up the show, is that you're going to find that the decisions start coming fast and furious. You're going to have set designers who are going to come to you with problems that, this was the plan, but this ain't working. Lighting designers are coming to you saying, we need more time for this or that. Costume designers that are like, that we can't find the costume, we can't buy the costumes, we got to rent the costumes, whatever. This person is, way too heavy for this role, whatever. They're going to be fast and furious, and you have to be one of those. No problem can bog you down. It's got to be water off a duck's back. You just have to say, address the problem as fast and as quickly as you can. Again, relying on designers, relying on technicians, relying on your stage manager can allow you to pass off responsibility to those people. Again, eventually, you have the ultimate say. But to say to the person who may be coming to you with an opportunity, seek out the stage manager and find out what she says about it, and then if that doesn't answer your question, come back to me and we'll make a decision. But at least A, it gives you a little bit more time to think about it, and B, if the stage manager can solve the problem, then you don't have to. If the set designer can solve the problem, then you don't have to. If the prop designer can solve the problem, you don't have to. Now, if those people are the ones that are bringing the problem to you, then you may have to make choices. Like we don't have enough pencils to go around. Can we mime the pencils? Whatever. You have to make that call. Well, if we're going to mime the pencils, we're also going to mime the plates at dinner. Great. Or that might be awful. I don't know. It's your choices that you have to make as to where the lines are and what the realities are. One of the things that's, again, going to start happening here is you're going to start looking at gestures that the characters are making, and you have to start identifying the gestures that are, for instance, let's say you're doing cabaret, and suddenly you have a first dress, and the Kit Kat girls are all, for the first time, exposing parts of their body that the Kit Kat girls may never have intended to expose to people on stage. Well, the uncomfort in the costume is not the character's discomfort, it is the actress's discomfort. And so again, you're going to need to do whatever you can to get the actor past their own personal approach. Now, could it be you go to the stage manager, the costume designer, and say, could we add some ribbon? Could we add a little to make things a little larger? Can we get a next larger size? Whatever. And in which case, hopefully the costume designer can accommodate. But sometimes it's just the actor has got to deal with those opportunities. Especially when you're dealing with things like corsets, when you're dealing with things like hard sole shoes. Modern actors are just not accustomed to wearing those things. And so I would encourage you as a director to have those things available as early as possible in the rehearsal process so that the actors can get accustomed to wearing those devices. Because if you're doing a play that happens in the late 19th century, guess what, ladies? You're going to wear corseted in some way. Now, does it have to be to the extent that the ladies were corseted in the 19th century? No, there's no way that anybody's going to have a 12-inch waist in the modern world. But there were people in the 19th century who had 12-inch waists and were proud of it and were corseted down to the 9th degree, right? So you're going to have some sort of alteration of the original, but you still need to be aware of how that's going to work, and there's movements you can't do, right? They're just things you aren't going to be able to reach. There's a reason why chairs became chaise lounges, because people couldn't sit certain ways because of the boning of certain objects. I'm not going to get any more descriptive than that. The other thing is, things like two people being in love. There just is, you may need to work with the actors separately in order to find physical gestures that they can accommodate, even though the two actors involved may detest one another. Some things like just talking to them individually. What is it about this other person? And it may be as simple as they smell. Get them some toothpaste, get them a mint. My grandmother always told me, don't ever decline a mint. If somebody's offering you a mint, it might be for a reason. So, you don't want to embarrass anyone, but you also want to help solve the problem. And personal hygiene is certainly, when you're in close proximity, something that people are, have to deal with. One of my favorite stories is about a woman named Candy Buckley. I don't know if you know Betty Buckley, but Betty Buckley is Candy Buckley's, she's married to Candy Buckley's brother, so does that make her sister-in-law? Anyway, Candy Buckley is one of my favorite actresses. She has a very unique posture on stage that's very commanding. And anytime you see Candy Buckley in a role, it's like, wow, those are incredibly strong, masculine choices for that beautiful woman to be making. The thing about it is, if you see her a second or a third or a fourth time, you realize that she's making the exact same choices for every single character that she does. So it becomes, even though it's not a person, it's not the way she walks in life, it becomes her way of acting. That we have a friend who constantly speaks in a British accent when they're on stage, just because they're speaking properly. And it's like, Val and I have a joke about, well, this person's doing their English accent again. So again, as a director, be aware of those things. How much you point that out, again, if it's not hurting the production, I wouldn't necessarily worry about Candy Buckley problem, if it's aiding and abetting. But it's one of those things where if I was working with her for the second, third, fourth time, I might make her aware, and she might appreciate it. I don't know. She might say thank you for telling me. Nobody would ever tell me I did this sort of thing. Again, constantly be aware of the picture you're creating. It is a moving picture, but everyone should be available to the audience's eyes. And again, that may mean not just sitting in the middle of the house. It may mean sitting stage right or house left, and watching the show from different seats during the course of rehearsal, so you can make sure that your avenues to see the actors on stage are always open to the audience members. Yes? Again, it may not be 100% possible, but the more open you are, the more available you are, the easier it is for audiences to understand what's going on the stage. This is the exact opposite of each other. You should avoid stagnation. Again, two people sitting talking at dinner, death for 2 hours. So stagnation can be, it can be, but it could also be fantastic. The other thing is, we talked about this last time, it don't necessarily mean just move around for movement's sake. Have a rational reason why people move. But even if you have two people sitting at a table, you can have people cross legs, change directions, change attitude. I have a rule about how an actor or how a character touches their face, depending upon how close they are or how far away they are to a decision. So if an actor or character is given a choice, and the character is between one or two things, and they're pretty close to telling you what the actual fact of the matter is, they tend to rub, and this is true of people in life, they tend to rub below their mouth. If you've given a problem to a person and they're amazed that anybody would even have the problem, hadn't even considered this problem, their hand tends to go to the middle of their face, around their eyes, and they, rubbing, going, oh my God, what have I done here? Whatever, what can I do? But if you give somebody a real problem that they are never seen, it's like, oh my God. Anytime you see 9/11 pictures, people are holding their heads. People who are amazed for whatever reason grab the top of their heads. And because plays tend to be about dramatic moments, these and how a person touches their face can be very telling, and it's something we're accustomed to reading the movement as a person. When we see it in real life, we think, oh, that person is lost. This person is looking for answers. This person's almost figured it out, right? So again, just a couple of things as a director, some fun things to know. Focus. There are times that you need to have absolute focus, but allow for the audience to have times when they're not always focused. Allow for actors to to seize power, but in order for somebody to seize power, it either A, doesn't need to exist, or B, somebody else has it. If somebody always has the basketball, that's one game. If there are times when there's an intermission where the referee has it, it allows the audience to take a little break. Wow, I can do a little comic relief, something, to give the audience, get them out of the pressure of figuring out who has the basketball or the football or whatever metaphor we're going to go for there. Again, you're going to have strong actors, you're going to have weak actors. You're going to have strong playwrights, you're going to have weak playwrights. You're going to have strong shows, you're going to have weak shows. It doesn't matter who is strong, who is weak, it is still the director's show. You are the storyteller. It is your opportunity. You are the person who has decided to cast these people. You're the person who made the choices about rhythm, about pace, about design, who coordinated all those things. It is your responsibility. If things are wrong, fix them. If it means cutting a character, cut them. If it means cutting a line, cut it. If it means altering a set or cutting a set, cut it. Will it piss people off? Yes. Somebody worked really hard on painting, designing, doing all that sort of stuff, but at the end of the day, if it doesn't work, Make it work. Figure out a way. Alter it. Given the choices you have, if the choice you have is nobody's wearing a costume, well, nobody's wearing, they're wearing clothes. We're gonna do it all in t-shirts. It won't be the first time it's happened. Val always says the first thing she starts off with is everybody wearing costumes or t-shirts with their characters' names on them, and then we got to figure out from there. Dramaturgs, again, are very useful tools and can be somebody you can rely on to be a separate eye. Again, I would never, stage managers, absolutely. Stage managers give notes, give things about, especially language, especially bobbled lines or miscues, all that sort of stuff. The dramaturg I would take under my wing and ask for another eyeball, but the dramaturg's role is not to give notes to the actors. The dramaturg can come to you with notes. I think that's totally appropriate, and then you as the director can discern whether to pass those notes along or not. Here's a little couple minutes on dramaturgs.
I've always liked the word dramaturg because nobody knew what it meant. For me, it also implies co-editing, as I do with John Guare, the Lincoln Center Theater Review, which is a literary review that we produce 3 times a year that is sort of an added conversation to the plays we present with our audiences. I also run the Lincoln Center Directors Lab, which is a large-scale project that the theater does for emerging stage directors. When needed, I do sometimes small, sometimes very massive research for actors in productions, if that's called for. So it's a kind of job that can be whatever you make it to be, depending on the needs of your theater and your own interests, I guess. When you're a dramaturg, you work with the director, Mark Lamos, our director, who's working right now on the Grand Manor. The director's in charge of the interpretation, the director's in charge of the room. You're never doing anything the director doesn't know about. Each production is totally different, and that's one of the great things about being a dramaturg. If you look around my office, you'll see piles of books about spirit rituals that I worked on when we did Joe Turner's Come and Gone, along with books about orgasm, which I used for In the Next Room by Sarah Ruhl. Every 6 months, it's something radically different. This is the ideal job for people who love literature, who speak languages, who understand and love actors. When I go on to a stage and I see a ghost light, I'm a happy person, and that has never ceased. It's a funny combination of characteristics.
Again, I would, one of the opportunities that you have is that you are the leader of this group. And I can promise you that if you're on time, if you're prepared, if you're hardworking, people will get the message. They will tend to be on time, they tend to be hardworking, and they will tend to do a good job. If you're lackadaisical, if you show up a half an hour late, if you're constantly demeaning to others, you're just stirring the pot, because there are no more cruel persons in the world than actors who are constantly looking for attention from the director and it's like trying to find favor with the parents, right? And so I would be aware that you're fostering the environment in which you happen. If you're constantly being amazed by the fact that your cast will never show up, look at yourself. Do you show up? Are you on time? Are you early? If you need to be early, if the rehearsal starts at 7:30, tell yourself to be there at 7. That way, if you show up at 7:15, you're late to you, but you're early to the rehearsal. If you need to say 6:30, then arrange your life to be there at 6:30. Be on time. Be ready to work. Don't waste people's time by calling rehearsal that you're not prepared for. Okay? That seemed very serious, didn't it? It was. Again, things like sign-in sheets can help stage managers know who's there, who's not. You need to make actors aware that it is the stage manager's show. You are there to guide the production artistically, but ultimately, at the end of the day, when you say goodbye, that means you're done with them, but the stage manager may have things like fittings they need to go to, like reminders of the next day's rehearsal, all that sort of stuff that is business that you don't want to take care of. Let the stage manager handle it. Yes, that way the stage manager is figuring out the problems of the people that can't make it at rehearsals, all that sort of stuff. And then when it needs to be brought to your attention that several people can't make a rehearsal, instead of having an all understudy rehearsal, which can be very useful, you can at least decide to change the rehearsal or alter the rehearsal or do whatever you need to do. But the stage manager used to deal with that in the first thing. Date everything. Every piece of paper you put out, every piece of paper the stage manager puts out, every design that any designer puts out, everything needs to be dated because things change. And sometimes it's not putting more on, it's taking things off. And so you always need to have the latest version of either the prop list or set design or whatever it is, and you're going to wind up with all these things in your prompt script, and to have a date on them so that you can see when these choices were made. Again, it's one of those things where just because the choice was made 2 weeks ago doesn't necessarily mean that now you can't change your mind, if that's what's needed for the play. Be aware that just because you made a choice, no matter how much it's going to embarrass you to change your mind, if that's what the play needs, be open to that choice. I am somebody who's very open to anybody's suggestion. As a designer, I hope that the rest of my design team is open to my suggestions. If I'm designing lights and I have a set choice or costume choice, I hope that they're listening, because I wouldn't make the suggestion if it wasn't something that I felt was inherent in the play. So have your eyes and ears open, and again, because it comes from a life that you're not living, it may be even more valuable than your choice, because it's a different choice and the characters are all different. So at least hear it through, at least see it through. You can then go back and cut things if you need it be. You should never take a side in conflict, right? It's one thing to hear, to listen, to understand, but you should never take a side in it. As soon as you take a side in it, the resolution is going to happen, and then somebody's going to be mad at you for taking a side, right? So as much as possible, I would stay away from conflict. Again, let stage managers, assistant stage managers, whoever handle any kind of conflict like that. All I care about is the work you're doing on stage. Now, if somebody's parent got divorced, do you need to know that? You know, it might explain why Johnny is not as up-tempo as he usually is. And so sure, it may be that you just need to take it easy, or say, you know what, the understudy's going on tonight, right? So I'm not saying you want to be totally out of the loop, but you don't want to take sides with things, because that just leads to inner turmoil, and that's the last thing you need in any kind of work. Again, this positive energy, positive attitude, all for one, one for all, those are great attitudes to have in a cast. Nitpicking, all that sort of stuff is stuff that will try and itch its way in. Fight it as best you can. Lay little mousetraps so that it doesn't impede, yes? But again, you want to keep an open eye and open ears to constantly review the play that you're producing and make sure it's saying the things you want to say with the play. Cool? All right, next time we'll talk about your blocking projects. So you need to turn those in, and we'll talk more about that then. Thanks.